I am Joshua K. Sabra, Esquire, and he is Dr. Miles Salisbury, and you are listening to the Miles Ahead podcast, where we share tactics, techniques, and protocol to improve your physical, mental, and spiritual health while you walk the path of the warrior. Stay tuned. On today's episode, Dr. Miles and I discuss the importance and joy of intimacy as it relates to personal relationships, romantic relationships, and what barriers we face in the creation of these things, whether it's low self-esteem, a insecure attachment style, and most importantly, we cover how we can possibly heal ourselves so we can have more of the joy that we want to have in our lives. And we're live.
We're back.
Happy Memorial Day.
I'm supposed to say happy. Sad.
Sad.
It's a sad. We're memorializing. It's not a happy day.
Yeah.
It's weird. I know we're conditioned to say happy for holidays, but
Memorial Day is for those who have sacrificed their lives.
correct. It's a remembrance.
And Veterans Day is to celebrate
Yeah.
the volunteers.
You can say Happy Veterans Day, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. This is for who has paid the ultimate sacrifice.
I made the mistake of looking in on the Ukrainian-Russian conflict, and seeing the enlistees of for the enlistees. That was
Quote unquote. Yeah. We volunteered for this.
conscripts who showed up who didn't flee the country. In Russia. Seeing those 20-year-old kids get voluntold to join the Russian army. I watched about 10 or 15 minutes of this Vice documentary, and I turned it off because I was like, oh God, that's so sad.
It's pretty depressing. Yeah.
The casualty rate for the Russian army has been catastrophic, and the documented casualties are in the hundreds of thousands. And who knows how many starved to death or were executed or...
That's been their battle plan for like 300 years, though. It usually works. Just throw bodies at the problem.
A trit.
Yep. And it doesn't really work out well for a country and a population decline, though. You know, they have a lot of people now, but they're not a lot of people making babies. And a lot of old people.
In this is not a military podcast, so we'll switch gears real quick. But the amount of loss of personnel and materials, equipment, it's telling how unsuccessful it's been, because I think I just on my way over here, Putin said, "Oh, we are open to negotiations. We could call a truce. We don't really need to denazify this country." And if that's a big signal, if he's walking back his own statement on what their goal was. So I think I don't know if they're certainly not going to negotiate a truce when they've taken about a third of their country. But that's a sign that things are not working. All right. Sad Memorial Day for our country, and who are acknowledging the losses that we've taken and the sacrifice that our people have committed for our freedom and American interests at home and abroad.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you probably saw that when you were in Afghanistan.
Oh my God.
Bring back some sad memories, I'm sure.
What a wild time. I was at the gym, and a Vietnam veteran was leaving when I was getting there, and I thanked him for his service, which is always a fun thing to do, because veterans, we don't like that, and I like to.
That's awkward.
I like to do that as a nod to the older veterans, and just to make them mad. And but we were just asking each other questions about our tours. He did 3 years with one tour in country in Vietnam. And even though it was not a fun tour, he still considered enlisting or, doing another 17 years because it's such a honor to be a part of. And it's such a emotionally powerful experience. And I would be horrified if I had to get near Vietnam in any capacity.
Yeah.
And yet I get what he was saying because it's such a emotionally impactful experience for a person to go through. So
it is an awkward thing. How do you respond to that statement? Thank you for your service. I mean, it feels good, but you're like, I don't know what to say. I was talking to a team guy once, or a Navy SEAL, and his response was beautiful. It was like, thank you for paying your taxes. That's a good way to like just neutralize it and walk away. Like, I don't want to feel awkward, but I want to thank you for this saying thank you and see ya.
Yeah, you do watch Cobra Kai?
Oh yeah.
The villains always have the best responses to those because they're, on some measure disingenuous and some measure totally genuine.
Yeah.
But when someone says, because he was in Vietnam,
Right. Yeah.
right? So his response is, "It was an honor to serve," and he just he bows his head very humbly, And so I steal that one.
That's a good one. Yeah. Well, take in Memorial Day, do the Murph if you can, and like Josh said, this isn't the military deep dive podcast, which we'll do in the future, but just want to say that since it is tomorrow Memorial Day, or today if you're listening to this, or the day after. But what are we talking about today? Or should we talk about what we're listening to, as we always do? I always forget that.
I've been listening to freaking Blink-182.
Classic. New album?
No.
Old school?
No. Just the fun ones.
Yeah.
First 3 albums, the best.
So good. I got sent a song by someone I never heard of. I'm in Connor Beaton's alliance program for men's work. We have groups, and I'm doing his mentoring program, working with men. So I have all these WhatsApp channels open on my phone, my own, from the retreat. I can't remember who sent it. It was one of those 3. They sent me a song by Lauren Daigle, Daigle, and the song's called Thank God I Do. It's actually really good. It's sappy. I never heard of her, but she's got a good voice, and it was a good song.
I love it.
Emotional, provoking. Anyways, speaking of provoking emotions, that kind of gets at what we're going to talk about.
Okay. Yeah. We'll hop right into the topic for today, which is intimacy and what, intimacy, why we want it, what it looks like when we try and get it, and all of the barriers that keep us from developing true intimate relationships with our friends or our partners. And that's probably my favorite topic. Of all of the human needs, love and connection, that's most of our number one, but that's my driver in every sense of the word. And I didn't know about healthy intimacy until much later on in life. And one of those things, like when you learn it, it's like a beautiful mind. You start to see all parts of your life that were motivated by it. And I think intimacy, I think of love and connection, but a personalized version of it, like that's specific to you and maybe specific to your friends and the way that you engage one another.
Like put into your own language sort of a thing.
Yeah. So like one of my top 3, ways of developing intimacy / enjoying an intimate relationship is going on a road trip. And
good one.
Yep. Face, windshield time, tell stories, learn about the other person's past, where you connect, where your thoughts and philosophies diverge. And you're having a shared experience of usually going somewhere new or sharing something together. And that is like a great example of an intimacy in a really sort of innocuous or sideways approach to getting it. And a lot of the things that I did in my life that were for on the outside maybe achievement or ego, inside we're motivated by that, in sense of trying to create intimacy and personal connection with other people.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's a good way to get at it. Road trips.
When you think of intimacy, Miles, what comes up for you?
Well, being in my field, I always go back to attachment theory, which we'll dig into today. It's the ability to let people in, know you deeply with vulnerability or openness, and be able to give that back just as much. It's not a one-way street, two-way street. Just basically being able to be open. People know you more deeply. You're able to be seen, and you're able to see other people, able to attune to them. They can attune to you. And then you get really close for it. You really know someone, you know their shit, you know their good stuff. You can forgive them for stuff because you know their pain. You can love them for that. You can help them heal. You can grow together. You're kind of walking the path together and supporting each other. A two-way street, not one person's doing the other person's work. But I think that's the key thing. A lot of people crave intimacy, but then they either caretake or they can't let a lot of that in because they don't feel safe or trust, which we'll get into why that is later today. But for me, it's knowing someone deeply and letting them know you deeply.
So this is separate. I mean, neither of us mentioned physical intimacy.
Well, that's a byproduct.
Interesting
to me, because sometimes that can get interrupted. So we were talking about this other day, and with Connor, like with sex with men, sometimes we can not be intimately there with the person. It's object, like they're an object, right? We're just kind of like getting off with their body or vice versa. But you're not making love. Like there's a difference. That's physical intimacy. Just because you're having sex doesn't mean it's intimate necessarily. It is an intimate act and it does kick off attachment stuff, but you can totally dissociate from that or not go there, you know? So it does go with the territory, but I think the knowing somebody emotionally or knowing you as a human has more depth than just the physical act. Definitely goes with the territory and definitely kicks it up, but I don't think it starts there.
You know, it's funny. I mean, it's not funny. It's ironic that you mentioned that. Neither of us mentioned physical intimacy, but it can kick up emotional issues.
It always will.
And you're talking about men can be disassociated emotionally, in physical intimacy or in sexual encounters. And I agree. And I feel like women, I've recently learned and felt that women are actually even better at disassociating or disconnecting. Because like traditionally, like when I was growing up, it was like, oh, the concept that was shared with me with my family members and people in my community was that, you only kiss someone if you really like them. Girls take this very seriously, so physical contact is very emotionally charged for women. It's very emotionally charged for me. That was it always felt like it was very emotionally charged for me. And as I got older, it almost seemed like I was the one that was emotionally vulnerable and emotionally attached to a girlfriend, or, if I were physical with that person.
Yeah.
And I see women also have a tremendous capacity for disassociating or decoupling the physical intimacy from emotional intimacy, especially now in this dating.
Oh yeah, it's becoming more like women are playing like what men used to do. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, anyone's capable of that with attachment wounds, of course. But yeah.
So okay, if intimacy is the goal, and being seen, letting someone see you, or letting somebody in, letting someone understand you, and you vis-a-vis getting into their world. I love that as the definition, which fosters this really strong personal connection. And you said it. You have emotional goodwill that you extend to that person because of you understand part of their story. And it's kind of probably one of the biggest keystones to a happy and healthy life is strong personal connections. So if intimacy is the goal, what Um, I think a lot of, like, again, to go back to just a traditional model for the listener, on the at a superficial level, I think people would say that women are more seeking of emotional intimacy and maybe interpersonal or mental, you know, intimate knowledge of another person, and men are traditionally more seeking physical intimacy from a relationship. But it sounds like from our just little riff here that everyone is really looking for that deep emotional connection, and a byproduct of it is that physical connection. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, for sure. I'm just thinking that for some people with attachment wounds going to the intimate part, if you don't tolerate intimacy well, even kissing before sex can be more emotionally evocative. I'd rather just go right to sex, and it's easier. Things skip it. It's weird to think about that, but kissing is very intimate, and that you would think that would be the reverse, but it's not. It's an intimate act, face to face, up close.
Oh man. Brought it, you just kicked off a story in my mind. We'll bring it up later. We talk about barriers. Well, let's get into barriers to intimacy because you just mentioned it. So you're talking about attachment styles, and I want to get into that. But I think on a more obvious note, well, when people think about barriers to intimacy, a lot of times I think people are observing that, like, men and women, again, just to go to a stereotypical viewpoint, men and women are coming at that conversation from two different places. Men being more visually stimulated and wanting to be physically intimate with an attractive partner, and women being more socially stimulated and wanting a partner who is a quote unquote high value man. I don't spend a lot of time on internet forums. I just hear this term bandied about. So you can correct me at any time, Miles, but socioeconomic status being what women might be observing and assessing. Again, we're just being stereotypical. We're going to cut these apart here in a second.
Yeah, there are some truth to what you're saying.
That men are valuing looks, women are valuing economic ability, and just in that dichotomy, or that tug of war, there's already tension about what each person, how they are defining who they want to be intimate with, and how they want that intimacy to go. Are we in the ballpark here?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you think about when couples get together, sometimes the guy will put on this big dog and pony show and win the mate. And then they check that box and they go back to work, and the woman's like, what about the relationship? I want this to keep going. We were doing this. And then so maybe she'll not feel good about the relationship. If that happens, probably she won't feel good about sex, and she'll stop having sex, and the guy will get pissed. Like, I've won this battle already. I'm working and I'm providing for you. We should have sex. And this push-pull thing starts to happen. Happens in a lot of relationships. Yeah, if you think evolutionarily, women were probably looking for a mate who could protect them, keep them safe, keep the kids safe, hunt, bring food back. And the guy was thinking, I would like someone who can be nurturing, take care of the kids, and make food. And here's the kill I made, and go ahead and make the food. So women will seek that out, and guys will seek that out now. I mean, if you talk to evolutionary psychologists, they can talk about this much better than I can. So there's some needs there. And if a woman feels like a man is not a man enough, she doesn't feel safe and doesn't feel good about the relationship, and feels like she has to be the mom, it's going to go downhill. And it gets messy now, because what is even masculine in a man these days? And we're kind of hosed. We either have to can't be toxic, and so we go the other way and try to be uber feminine. That doesn't really fit. And like, if we show any signs of masculinity, we're kind of kicked in the balls for it these days. And like, you can't be masculine because it's toxic, so I guess we'll act feminine. And it's like, yeah, we all have a feminine side, but not to that extent. So we're kind of lost. And so women are kind of dominating right now, but where do we fit back in? They'll probably miss us at some point. They're getting quite pissed off at us right now. I'm kind of going off to a different rail right now, but
well, I want to disentangle a couple of points. Like the conversation in public or online is a lot different than the conversation I think people have in with each other in private. You talked about demonstrating masculinity versus demonstrating femininity, and what is rewarded in private or in public, and then against like how we're, you said women are crushing us right now.
They're crushing everything, getting after it.
Yeah, women. What that means, listener, is socioeconomic outcomes and health outcomes are good for women and getting better. The women under 30 are more likely to own a house as a single person than a man.
Go to college.
They're much more likely to go to college and do better in college when they go, and more likely to graduate, more likely to have gainful employment, less likely to commit suicide, more likely to live longer. So, on almost every metric, women are outperforming, and the gap is growing even still. So it's, women are adapting to this new modern world in a much better way on paper.
On paper. Yeah.
And
for now,
men at this moment are struggling in a lot of ways. Basically the inverse of everything we just said about women. But I think to the intimacy conversation, a third of men under 30 report not having any physical contact with a member of the opposite sex in the last 18 months or 1 year, I think, depending on what study we're talking about. So, and this is self-reported with no one seeing it. So this is fairly, hopefully fairly accurate, or sadly fairly accurate. But I also think women report this too, is just there being fewer prospects in the dating market.
Oh yeah. We're just not showing up for them. We're not going out. We're not dating. We're scared to approach women. We're going to get shut down. XYZ. We're going to be creepy, whatever it is.
Yeah. There's a lot of worrying about judgment of the community. So, men less likely to own a home, more likely to be unemployed, much more likely to be unemployed, much more 10 times as likely to go to prison, 4 times as likely to kill themselves. And unfortunately, we haven't hit the bottom of the barrel yet. I mean, these numbers are still
climbing,
still getting further and further apart, in very detrimental ways to men. So but the point here is not to beat men up or laud when we're talking about intimacy and barriers to connection. And the men, stereotypically, the men that can get or are in the dating market are opting for what I wrote down in my notes as low energy, low vibe connections, meaning it seems like some men who are even very successful, well-rounded in every other way would rather have a superficial or transactional relationship with a attractive, potentially younger partner than a deep, committed, wholly integrated relationship with some of this emotional intimacy that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And that's unfortunately, it doesn't seem like, first of all, it's an old story, whether you're reading, history books,
right,
or even
King Henry went through a few wives.
Yeah. Well, just, being, 100 years ago, it was pretty normal to, for a teenage woman to be betrothed to a middle-aged man.
Yeah.
And that wasn't considered toxic or traumatic. That was normal.
Mm-hmm.
And a good deal for the family.
Yeah, it was a deal. It was a dowry.
Yeah.
Peacemaking, Game of Thrones stuff.
But so in today's world, I think that that idea of what I would consider, I'm labeling as a transactional relationship with a partner, it goes both ways, right? Because if you're valuing the socioeconomic status of a man and you're trying to attract that person, and that person is attracted to physical visual qualities, or your how aesthetically pleasing you look, you already are creating the perfect recipe for that, tug of war we were just talking about earlier, where nobody's actually getting what they want. But that's just quote unquote how the game is played.
Agreed.
And underneath that, we're going to get into this attachment style piece and how this feeds the fire for both, fuels the fire for both people. But one of the things that's true, whether you're a man or a woman, is that intimacy is more difficult to tolerate. Love is more difficult to tolerate if you have low self-esteem. And people who don't love themselves very much, can't tolerate very much love from other people. And I've certainly had that experience, and I didn't know that's what it was, because what is it when I was very emotionally fragile and I lacked confidence, I made up for it with false confidence or
Overcompensation.
oh yeah, for sure. But I would appear confident. I would take on high risk activities, whether it was athletically or financially or interpersonally or whatever. I don't know how much
a few memories
I don't know
pop
how much the listeners want to go into just yeah, dating multiple women at the same time is a very dangerous game, even if they all know about it. Especially if they all know about it. Actually, it's it's mentally and emotionally taxing.
Enjoy that one.
In a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
So, but having low self-esteem, I had a hard time tolerating intimacy and people being genuinely kind and loving to me. And I think if you were to look at me on the outside looking in, that would not have been obvious, or wasn't obvious to me.
Yeah, probably weren't taught it. Was not the template growing up.
Yeah, for sure. So, contributing to this low self-esteem are some of these models of the developing our language of the world, our developing our relationships, how we engage with ourselves and our intimate relationships early on can be hugely impactful to these development stages.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to get into some of the processes that go on when we are developing, and from, you said in utero to 12, or as a little kid to a big kid to a fully grown kid. What happens? Yeah, what's supposed to happen and what happens? Like, so how do you look at this, Miles?
You can look at child development, you can look at human development, and then you can look at where that fits for attachment wounds. And there's so many people you could pull up, but I had Jean Piaget's 4 stages of cognitive development. And this is what's happening with your brain and how you develop as a kid and into young adulthood. And then I had Eric Erickson's, which gets into it in much more depth. And then the last one I pulled up was Dewey Freeman's attachment styles and his stages. His are really good. He's a professor at Neurological, where I went. He works with Connor and some other guys. It's great. His attachment model is super good. And he borrows from the big hitters of the attachment world, John Bowlby, Mary Ainsworth. But he sort of synthesized his own, and I think it's really good. So I wanted to talk about it and give him some credit. But first, we'll just go briefly over Jean Piaget. I think this was in the 50s. He had 4 stages. First one's the preoperative stage of cognitive development, 2 to 7 years. Did I skip one? No, I did skip one, sorry. Sensory motor, birth to 2 years, knowing the world through movements and sensations. Kind of think of yourself at this time, like what was going on as a listener, and maybe you'll see where you had good development versus something happening and interrupting that development. The first one, you learn about the world, go through basic actions such as sucking, grasping, looking, listening. Learn that things continue to exist, sort of object permanence. So the baby learns, like when you're really young, a parent put a ball in front of a baby and then they take it away and it forgets it even existed. As they mature, they'll go, oh, where'd that ball go? That's a permanent object. They'll start to realize that they're separate beings from the people and objects around them. They'll start to separate the fact that they're not an extension of their mom, which when you're a baby, you think the boob is part of you. Realize your actions can cause things to happen in the world around them. So that's birth to 2 years. Next one's pre-operational stage, 2 to 7 years. You can start to think symbolically, learn to use words and pictures to represent objects. You tend to be egocentric. Obviously, when you're little, you do that. Struggle to see things from the other perspective of others. And think of that statement, like if that doesn't get developed and there's a hole, maybe you struggle with that into adulthood. Getting better with language and thinking, but still thinking very concrete terms. Then the concrete operational stage comes, and that's 7 to 11. You start to think logically, understand the concept of conservation, that the amount of liquid in a short, wide cup is equal to that in a tall, skinny glass, for example. Thinking becomes more logical and organized, but still concrete, and you can start to use inductive logic or reasoning from specific information to a general principle. And then the last one is formal operational, 12 and up. Start to think abstractly. You can reason about hypothetical problems. You can think more about moral, philosophical, ethical, social, and political issues that require theoretical and abstract reasoning. And you can start to use deductive logic or reasoning from a general principle to specific information. So that's Piaget's stages. Those are your child development. And then
Can I have a couple questions?
Yeah.
So like this is like a description of what the hardware is going through.
Yeah, exactly.
In your brain. And that in utero to 2 years old, we're talking about that's kind of the finishing of the gestation period of a mammal. And in humans, we finished the gestation period or the embryonic development. We finished that outside of the womb because of the birth canal and the way that
bigger
humans
brains
have developed.
Yep. Can't get out the hips needed to stand, so they had to get less wide, so that baby had to come out earlier because of a bigger head. So evolution says.
Right. And in that phase is when the physics engine is developed of how reality works. Like you said, I'm separate from the boob. The time is a part of this reality, and time, it has a impact. And when I do this happens. So it's the finishing of how this physics engine works in this world, how we move our bodies and interact with things outside of ourselves. And then that segues right into language, which for me, just in my personal belief, this is from 2 on. This is, so this, like you said, you mentioned it, symbols in the world, what they represent, what the meaning behind them is, words, drawings, ideas. And this is how we start to create meaning and association. And through that language that we learn and develop, everything stems from that, because from language comes logic. And then from logic comes what is life-serving, what is moral or immoral. And interruption of the language learning or language associations and things, that's where things come off the rails. And I think that's where the connections and the attachments and then the misfirings of I think most trauma is going to be somewhere between in utero and 9. Did you say there was a sensitive time span in there? And the most profound, in my experience and observations and reading, that's where the most profound miswirings occur.
Yeah, we're very neuroplastic at that age and very impressionable. And a lot of stuff happens pre-verbal. And your brain's accounting for like 20%, your body's accounting for like 80%, your nervous system's getting wired. So it's a lot of sensitive things going on, and that can go off the rails real easy. If adversity and trauma hits much later, it's much easier to work through and heal. But if, yeah, from in utero up to 7, 8, it's pretty crucial. And there's even evidence like if your mom was very, very stressed during your pregnancy, you can come out with a pretty hot nervous system with also very anxious. It's like stuff's happening early on, also the foods you eat, things like that.
100%. And I think just to call back to the veteran piece, PTSD in veterans, 50% of veterans have PTSD by the time they enlist.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is all drawn from what Miles is just sharing, was what childhood is like and what the upbringing is like from this population. And the the amount of nonsense, I call it nonsense, but it's pretty much just life. When life can get wild for a certain population of people. And you were saying it's easier to heal as you get older, and I think a lot of the problem that I've read, many problems that I've read about treating veterans, is that people think they're treating these explosive experiences, which are traumatic
For sure.
but oftentimes the wiring was crossed long before.
Yeah. It just exacerbated the problem. Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people get into the military have lower prospects, maybe lower SES growing up, and it's just like hey, I can do the military. And they had a rough childhood. Like you said, they've already had some trauma, and then they go and get some good things from the military, but then you get blown up or something happens or you lose a buddy, and it's just that much worse. And even if you don't and that happens, that's still pretty horrific.
Absolutely. I admire, and I'm always fascinated by people who haven't experienced a lot of loss in their 30s and 40s, and I love it. I mean, I love it because it's just they're great people and they're wonderful character, and it's just a great example of humans in our big cross section of experiences can all cultivate the quality of life and character that we want or that we desire, given the right circumstances and behaviors. So here we are back to the conversation of interrupting neurological development and how that happens. And when that happens, these wires start to get crossed. You had another model that you're going to share?
Yeah, I had Erik Erikson's psychosocial stages. This is just a brief overview. There's so much to all these, but he has what we're talking about: infancy, birth to 18 months, and he has these basic conflicts that you go through all the way to 65 and up. And the first one's trust versus mistrust. Do you learn to trust the world or mistrust it? Important events are like feeding, nurturing, and the outcome is hope. Segment early childhood 2 to 3, and it's autonomy versus shame and doubt. Can I do things, or do I doubt I can do things? Kind of where learned helplessness can come from. Important events, toilet training, hopeful outcome is will. Can I do things? Then you get to preschool, 3 to 5 years, and it's initiative versus guilt. You're learning to explore, exploration, and then the outcome is, if it goes well, purpose. Then school age, 6 to 11, it's industry versus inferiority, and important events, school, and then outcome, if it goes well, confidence. Next one, adolescence, 12 to 18, of course, identity versus role confusion. I mean, I think we all struggle with that one in high school. Important events, obviously, social relationships, and the outcome is fidelity. Then you get to young adulthood, 19 to 40, it's learning to be intimate versus isolating, intimacy versus isolation. Relationships is the event, outcome, love. Middle adulthood, 40 to 65, generativity versus stagnation. It's work and parenthood, and the outcome is care. And then maturity, 65 to death, ego, integrity versus despair. It's reflection on life, and the outcome is wisdom. So these are some more stages you can take in to think about your life and where you're at in these years and what's going on. If you look up Erik Erikson's psychosocial stages, you can get a better understanding of what I'm talking about if you want to dig into that. It's pretty It's pretty good stuff. This is all leading into attachment, and I'm just going to use Dewey Freeman's model because it's good. But there's so many out there, but his is really spot on. Anything that you wanted to say about that one?
I don't know. I think people that the last model that you shared, I think so many people are confused about what those things are. And I think like any good model, there's like, elements of truth to everything. But um, some of those, characteristics, I think are, yeah, I don't even know if everybody even gets all of those.
No.
Specifically hope and wisdom. I don't know if that's something that people consciously adapt to or gather from their experience.
Yeah, that's the hopeful outcome. If you think about these on sort of like a triangle, and each one has a layer, and then look at that with like Swiss cheese with holes. Everyone has parts that are developed, and then where the holes is where you're missing it. And that sort of can show up in certain contexts. Like you might be good at work and then terrible about intimate relationships. Well, what's the difference? Is both a relationship? Well, there's a hole in the more intimate part, maybe, So people can get through, and chronological age rarely matches with emotional age until you fill those holes. And context is where you can find where your holes are, where you need to work.
I like that, in context.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're about to go into attachment theory, and I think everybody has great competence in certain areas of life and less competence in others. But let's get into it. What does Dewey have to say about attachment?
A lot of good stuff. Highly recommend his work. So he has another cone or triangle built into a couple stages throughout the lifespan. First one he calls it's the prenatal stage, when you're cooking, coming into being. That's where your mom's temperament, what's going on with her relationship, starts to affect what's going on with your neural development. If things are good and there's a good home life and she has a good relationship and she's not stressed out or depressed, that's good. Eating well. If your mom's like starving or stressed out, there's a lot of conflict at home, like they're already fighting in the relationship, and she's putting out a lot of neurochemicals, and your body's learning that that's what you're about to, this is the world you're about to come into. You're cooking and there's some stuff already, this is why it's so wild and why people have a hard time understanding attachment wounds. Most of the stuff is before you had words and logic. It doesn't really start to kick in until 6, this kind of stuff, 7. So that's the first one. This is in the oven.
Doesn't Brene Brown say that we come into this world hardwired for struggle? Is that what she means? Like it's game on. Your mother's nervous system is preparing us for the struggle that the mom is going through.
Yeah, the environment you're getting popped into. Yeah, it's preparing you for better or worse. It's so crucial, and it's so undervalued in the world of relationship and psychology. Attachment theory, I'm glad it's making a resurgence. I did my master's paper and dissertation on elements of attachment theory. I think it's just super crucial, but it's, I don't know, it's just not talked about enough still, but it's starting to come back. So then you're born, 0 to 18 months, and he calls it, is the world okay stage? Is my world okay? Is the environment safe? Is there chaos? Am I made to cry it out or not? Am I held? Am I touched? Are my needs starting to be met? And then the next one is, am I okay? Yeah, is my world okay? Am I okay? And those two are crucial stages. That's where some of the avoidant versus anxious styles get kicked.
What are the age brackets for those two stages?
0 to 18, and then 18 months to 3 years.
So 18 months to 3 years, 3 years to 18.
0 to 18 months is the world okay. and 18 months to 3 years is, am I okay? And so if your world's not okay, I think you start to develop the avoidant attachment. Like, let me put some walls up and protect. I have to do this myself. Another one maybe is more anxious. Am I okay? You know, I'm not, my relationship with you doesn't seem very good. Is it me? Am I the problem? Am I okay? Am I okay with you? Am I safe in this environment? As you develop, 3 years, 18 months, 3 years is how much can I do? How much can I do? That's sort of like going back to the other ones is like the industriousness. What can I do? And then next one is 6 years to 11 years. How well can I do? So if things are going well, you start to develop these stages. And then you get to 12 years to 20 years is the quintessential spiritual question. Who am I? Right? If you ever ask, who am I? What am I about? What are my needs? If you don't know that, you probably have an attachment wound. Because that's supposed to be developed and fostered by your parents to help you understand that. If you had to help your parents understand that, parentified child situation, the who am I it's got some holes in that stage, some Swiss cheese.
Yeah, I think as I learn more about my contemporaries and even younger, younger millennials and Gen Z, it does seem like enmeshment is a very common wound, and I'm going to use the term mental and emotional abuse that comes with those things when you're caretaking for a parent or for a guardian in some way. A lot of parents are looking for reassurance from their kids that they're doing a good job as a parent and they need to be approved of by their kid. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, they need friendship and emotional intimacy needs to be met from the kid through the kid, which is disgusting and difficult because it's disgusting. And I say that as someone who's been through that. It's disgusting in that now that I see like the relationship that I had with my mom in particular, I love my mom. And it was very unfortunate that she leaned on me for emotional intimacy, mm-hmm. because it hurt both of us, mm-hmm. in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. But I think that's really common.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Whatever wounds your parents have that they don't work, they get handed down to you to do that work until you do the work, which you're doing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, yeah, that's why I'm here. I'm secretly just using this as therapy for me, Miles, which is really great.
So he has a cool attachment cycle, what babies go through and where it can get interrupted. So we all need food, touch, movement as a baby. And we have those needs. We do things like cry, wiggle, be cute. And we smile, we kick, or we cry and try to get our needs met. And if things go well, our diapers get changed, we get fed, we get touch, we get attunement, which is the parent attuning to the kid's needs. They kind of can see, what's going on? And they take the cues from the baby, not force them upon them. Let the baby kind of set the stage. And the baby will go through those needs like 10 to 13 times per hour of whatever it is. It's just a blob with a nervous system telling its body it needs something. There's not a lot of logic going on. It's like, I feel stuff in my diaper. I don't like this. It needs to be clean. I am hungry. I need oxytocin. I need to touch. I need to start having eye contact, And you have these cues, and the tuned parent will see those cues and sort of help the baby get those needs, And the baby sets those cues, not the parent. If it gets reversed, then we got problems. If the parent's trying to forecast and control for things and not letting the baby set the cue and not following those cues, you're going to get it wrong. Or like, well, this is the time you should be asleep, and so cry it out because I need to go to bed. And I get you're tired, but that's a bad thing to do. The cry it out method is god awful. Just god awful. It's, in my mind, it's abuse. This is not going to work.
And we all were raised that way. So if you're listening to this, that's okay.
Yep. Don't do it. I mean, it's okay if like you put the baby down, they cry for a couple minutes and they go to sleep, you're good. But if it's going on minutes, 15 minutes, half hour, don't do that. They obviously have something going on. Either they're colicky or they just want touch. They want something. They just need attention. So work it up.
Yeah, it's I'm sighing because if you're a single parent and you're in this dealing with a child, as so many parents are, the the conflict between what you need and what the baby needs is apparent and pretty real and pretty fast. So I'm um I'm a big fan of leveraging family as much as possible.
Yes, we used to have a village, and now it's two people. We're expected to be a village when we're two people. Too many hats. It's not a good setup. I mean, you think about evolution and time over time. Like, did we have cribs 3, 4, 5, 600 years ago? Maybe started happening. Like before, baby was swaddled or held almost all the time. That's normal. But now we just throw them in a crib or a playpen. Say, this is your, go do your thing over there, or we give them an iPad. Even worse. That's really another bad move.
Yeah. And very, very few generations ago, there was like, depending on like now you can, look at a YouTube video or download a book and get something from a professional that will give you some guidance. But my mom, when she was 22 or 23 and had me, she luckily had access to my grandmother, who was a very lovely, nurturing woman, and was able to give her some coaching and some guidance on how to handle that. But yeah, I was allergic to milk, and I was a fussy baby, and my grandmother was very sweet. She had a ritual of putting a blanket in a dryer and warming it up, and then wrapping me in it and holding me until I burp myself to sleep.
That's it. Yeah, she got it. Yeah.
And that's enough.
Yeah, it goes a long ways, and it goes a long ways the wrong direction if that's not getting met.
Yeah, just shake the baby until it stops moving.
And some people do, sadly enough. Well, yeah. So if that 10 to 13 cycle per hour, the baby's going through that. If over time, I mean, the bar is pretty low for this. Like, it's like if you meet the baby's needs like 40% of the time, they're going to come out okay. That's really low. And people are failing 40% of the time. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, after 72 hours, Miles, you try and manage that. I mean, I would say that's pretty high for it's pretty high for a parent who's getting over 200 requests a day, and only 110 of them they're getting to. Yeah. That's actually, I would consider that that's a passing grade.
Yeah, especially if you're a single parent. That's why it's good to have family around.
So what's the next phase?
So that's a healthy cycle, but if it gets interrupted, the baby's doing this cry, wiggle, cute, smile, kick thing, and needs aren't getting met, you start to get really pissed off and get ragey, or you start to give up and shut down, collapse into yourself. And this is where it sets up those attachment wounds of either avoidant or anxious. Avoidant rage, anxious shutdown, or the fearful avoidant or disorganized as a blend of both. And this also sets you up for addictions. And he's talking about instead of attaching to the human, you learn to attach to the need you're missing. So say you have a mom who's just throws a bottle at you instead of breastfeeding and is like on the phone. And the baby wants more than that, wants the boob, wants your attention. It starts to attach to the bottle. And then as you grow up, you think, oh, okay, this is what do I attach to? And then it turns into maybe food. And then it turns into maybe substances. You're attaching to that need rather than the person. And I thought that was an interesting concept. You will attach to something. If it's not a human, you get obsessed with the need you didn't get, and you'll attach to that. You'll find ways to get that met. They're usually not what you're looking for in the end.
Yeah, and I think if you're listening to this and you're in the generation of elder millennial or whatever generation, it's very easy. I think video games are like such a technology is such a great catch-all because it's interactive, it's engaging in it because it changes, and video games have a progressive challenge to them, and it keeps parents from having to be engaged and or your environment from having to be engaged. And then all it takes is if you grow up in an environment that is threatening, then you actually want to get away from your threatening environment and get engaged into a video game or technology. And
Avoid.
I think, gosh, it was so easy for me to connect to, the Nintendo or the Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis or whatever, because I found my environment very threatening as a kid.
Yeah, it's a good way to check out and I'm out. It's adaptive. It makes sense. It helped you feel safe in an unsafe environment.
Totally.
But it can set you up for problems later. Like, it all makes sense growing up. Just because we have these wounds doesn't mean we're hosed or bad. Like, given your environment, that was actually a smart move for you to do.
So we're talking about what you labeled as a fragmentation, and
That's Dewey's fragmentation of
in
attachment.
Dewey's model, it's a fragmentation of attachment, and that's the moment of disconnect and of this neurological loop of your needs and your caretaker's actions, your guardian's actions, or your how you get your needs met from the people in your environment. And that basically sets you up, as you said, for addiction or dysfunction, and how, whether or not you come back to that and try to heal that, or how you relate to those moments, is your work and sets up your attachment style.
Yep. If we come out unscathed, which is rare, and we took a break a second ago, we were talking about a friend who went through quite a bit of trauma and came out okay. I mean, that does happen still. I don't want to discount that. But what the goal is to have is secure base. If we didn't get that growing up, we want to return to that, learn how to do secure base, which is I can tolerate intimacy and I can let people in, I can love people back, and I can tolerate when people leave me. I'm sad, I go through normal grief stages, but I know there are other humans on the planet, and once I'm over that, I go back out there. If you're getting into avoidance, like can't let people in, do the lone wolf thing, shut down, cut and run, you still want relationship and you still kind of go for them, but then your depth of letting people in is just not that deep because it's threatening, it's scary. That's the rage side. Then the collapse, more the anxious, like you get in a relationship with someone and then you like smother them. You can't have the relationships. Where are you? Why are you late? That's anxious. That's the fear of people leaving you, abandoning you. And then there's the disorganized, which is a flavor of both. Much more unfun. I feel bad for people who got stuck with that one. I myself grew up with that. It's much easier to just, if you have one insecure attachment style, then you can just work on the one issues. I have intimacy issues or I have abandonment issues. If you got both, it's like, good God, it's so much more work. But the point is to come back to secure base. If you had all your needs, well, more than 40% of your needs met, the food, touch, movement, nurturing, contact, over time, from gestation to 12, 13, you'll probably come out with a securely attached style. Your parents probably were securely attached. You watched them be securely attached. You watched them do conflict and then repair. And you didn't think, oh, conflict is bad. When they had it, they actually got closer and they did it skillfully. They were loving. And then they fostered me and who I was. And they said, oh, I love you because of X, Y, and Z. You're such a good kid. And I praise effort and, growth mindset, all that stuff. You get told kind of, or help to understand who you are. And they get to that who am I stage rather than you having to do it with your parents. Then the opposite happens. You come out with a securely attached style. And then relationships they're not easy. They're not easy for anybody, but they're a lot easier than if you're wounded. And you can do them as a quote unquote normal person, as you're sort of intended to do. But these days and ages, I think that's getting worse. You can, anytime there's a depression in the economy, or there's trauma, there's a war, it's always going to screw shit up. So once mankind figures that out, which maybe it's never, things will get better. But there's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now. We're going through another cycle of pain, setting a lot of attachment wounds. So we'll see. But I think the current generation, and I think millennials and Gen X especially, have been handed the shit sandwich of like how to heal relationships. We had it particularly bad. Where it was more the pull yourself from the bootstraps mentality, figure it out on your own. And then the younger generation, their shit sandwiches like the snowplow helicopter parents, where it's like the world's scary. Just stay here. I'll protect you and I'll do everything for you. You don't want that either. So we're kind of grappling with that. But I mean, that's maybe the point of why we're here, if you want to get spiritual. How will get us off the rails if I go spiritual? Anyways, we should probably tell the listeners how to heal.
Well, I mean, yeah, or they could tell us. The I don't think anybody gets out of their relationship with themselves or their parents gets through that without some trauma. That was Nicole LaPera, talks about in her book How to Do the Work, which is it's a very good book. It's probably the best book I've read on the subject of intrapersonal work.
Mm-hmm.
And she was basically indicating that you don't, when you're raising a kid, they will be traumatized by you in some small way. And hers was the sense of free fall or not having a sense of safety from her mom, who was looking for her sense of safety from her dad, and this instance of him not coming home on time from work, and they're at both of them being worried about his safety, but neither of them being able to ground themselves or have a sense of control or certainty about that.
Mm-hmm.
And that may seem innocuous to you if you've been through quite a bit. But that's enough trauma, enough stress to create a pattern, and I don't even know if that's a bad thing on a moral level, because the friction that we have with our caretakers in our environment is the impetus for us to leave our environment and grow and become, an individual. So I think that part of that is by design. By intelligence design, or our creator, God and her infinite wisdom, or the luck of randomness. And I think that most of the trouble that we have is thinking that. I think a lot of our own examined lives we view as I think it's common for us to view problems or conflict or trauma as us not getting what we want, when us not getting what we want is oftentimes some of the best things that happen to us as kids. And you were talking about snowplow parents, and what if you don't get into the private school, or you get cut from the team, or your girlfriend dumps you, or those are the things that are the best for our nervous system, because we're interacting with something we care about, and we get to receive some consequences, and we get to learn and grow from those. And then, not saying it's instant, it could take years of work to get over certain kinds of failure or pain. But I think that's emblematic of our identity. Like we form identities around these things, for better, for worse, and we can change our identity later. But I think it's important for our growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how we learn how to do relationships. Hopefully in a supportive environment where you can get mentorship, support, and then encouraged to go back out and skin your knee again, and then come back when you need support and comfort.
An acquaintance that I see at the gym is a industrial organizational psychologist and a life coach or executive coach for Nike, Intel, and probably a lot of other Fortune 500 company executives. And she says that organizations stagnate because leadership is reenacting their own trauma upon their organizations, and they don't know it.
Yes. Yeah, it goes both ways. Yeah.
And if these very successful C-suite executives are unable to cultivate, to use the language of this conversation, secure attachment, or whole healthy personal relationships with people above them and below them in the chain of command, then it's fair to say that I think all of us are going to have some level of dysfunction when it comes to interpersonal relationships or intrapersonal relationships, which is ultimately the source of all this stuff anyway.
Yeah, good point.
But I want to go back to those neurological loops because we're talking about healing trauma and or how to heal from these things. And I think to review what the big four are: mental abuse, neglect, mental and physical abuse, neglect, enmeshment, and abandonment are the big four. This is from the I don't want to talk about it book.
Oh, what's the author? It's a good book.
It's a framework of trauma. Like there's 4 big primary traumas and then many little lowercase t traumas. Traumas of not having a role model or,
Terrence Real. That's it. Yeah.
So neglect being the absence of fundamental needs being met. So for the state of Oregon, that means that the temperature in your home is below 60 degrees. There's inadequate food in your refrigerator or cabinets, and you don't have electricity because you're not able to do homework or you can't set an alarm clock to get to school. So those are very bottom of the barrel, definitions of neglect. I would it's outside of healthy food and electricity and heating and air conditioning. I would say access to safe adults to talk to, love, positive attention. I would put logistical support, to some degree. And not to, obviously, if you're in a rural area or in an urban area, you don't need as much, or maybe you need more logistical support because of the environment. But, if you're a listener and your parents told you they would pick you up from school and didn't, then that's what we're talking about.
Like multiple times.
Yeah. That's like, you're now responsible for much more than you probably should be.
Yes.
And that dovetails with like a role reversal or, some other little t traumas that can be huge parts of your life. Mental, physical abuse, being hit, kicked, called names, put in a cold room, put in a hot room, anything intentionally done to irritate or cause injury to a person. And that sounds bizarre and macabre and disgusting. And it's also extremely common because, hurt people hurt people. Mm-hmm. And so I think a statistic was it 3 out of 7 women will be sexually abused?
Wow.
To some degree when they're growing up. And in my neighborhood, it was 7 out of 7.
What?
Every female that I was in touch with in my close family and friend group for the first 14 years of my life had some level of abuse.
Damn.
And so obviously I'm from a lower socioeconomic status than the median of America, but I think that it's if you integrate all socioeconomic groups together, 3 out of 7 is the mean. But so it can happen in any economic conditions. But I think environments where there's less stability, it's likely they have
odds go way up. Yeah,
more abuse. And then abandonment, fairly obvious, lack of one or both parents.
Cry it out.
Yep.
Down to even that small detail.
Yeah, and you can be emotionally abandoned.
Yeah.
And not physically abandoned.
That's a good distinction. Yeah.
And I had friends who had parents that had animus for their kids and were completely emotionally not available for them. But they were physically still in their lives.
Props.
Yeah.
Just props. Cutouts.
That's right. And wow. So many memories are coming back.
Mm.
I'm not organized. I'm not going to out anybody, but I have so many questions for you, my friends.
Mm.
So the abandonment and neglect, enmeshment is probably the most common, which is the sharing of physical needs from a parent to a child. So confiding secrets in your kids and relying on them for your emotional well-being, for validation, for entertainment.
Help me do my checkbook, stuff like that. Even if I taking care, go get the groceries. I can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, borrowing money from your kids.
Yeah.
That is a strange place to be, and if that seems like a bizarre like turn of events, talk to more people.
Mm-hmm.
People, you'll be amazed at what some people's childhoods were like.
Yep.
And yeah, apparently you don't learn about how corrupting it is. And I say corrupting in like a just what we're talking about today, interrupting the normal cycle of intimacy and trust and attachment that can occur. Because you should trust. I mean, in a perfect world, we would trust our guardians and we would rely on them. They wouldn't rely on us.
Yep. It's all trust and safety.
When we become complete, individuated, independent people, then we can be relied on separate from the parent. But in that early stages of development, there is no separation from the health and well-being of the parent and
blended
the child. So that reliance is inconvenient and toxic at best, and perverted and distorted at worst.
Sets you up for codependency later. Good times.
Yeah. And I'm narrating out all these scenarios because it's so common for you. If you're like me, I never would have said the word abuse as something that I had experienced, because in the 80s, what's normal is if your kid lips off, a stranger could slap you.
Yeah, teachers. Yeah.
You were. Corporal punishment was only recently discovered as to be not a good thing.
Yeah.
and so like if it's normal, and by normal I mean common, I never would have described anything that I would have been through as abusive. And yet my therapist was like, well, when you've dealt with as much abuse as you, and I almost bristle at that. I was like, gosh, what are you talking about? And then you go through the different things that you've experienced and how they have contributed to your sense of self, and it becomes obvious that that I have had a disorganized attachment style because of those big T and little T traumas that have been wrapped through most of my experiences as a younger person, and as an older person, like with my marriage, the echoes of that trauma were infecting my behavior and the conversations I was having with my ex-wife, and vis-a-vis, and hers to mine as well. But neither of us had any awareness of like what even Mr. Dewey is talking about or Miles was saying until the last 2 or 3 years of constant therapy. I've been able to engage in that and do some of that inner work. And the upside is that I have really healthy, wonderful, secure, intimate relationships with the men and women in my life. And my quality of life is like 100% better or 1,000% better.
Doing the work.
And so what does that work look like? So give us an example of what the healing the trauma.
Yeah, and I'll flip that back to you and what you learned in your therapy and with your relationship, because that's a good story and a good example of what that can look like. So it goes back to attunement, the way your parents are supposed to attune to your needs. You got to get that back. Got to be with someone who can attune to you. I think Dewey talks about that as form of what he calls contact, and he defines that as a moment of present, attuned meeting of another at our physical, emotional, energetic and or spiritual boundaries. It's making contact with somebody in a deep way. When you go to therapy, you find a coach, that's what they're helping you to learn how to do. And get out of your head, get into your body, calm your nervous system, self-regulate, because that stuff's all over the shop until we're able to learn how to do that. And like you said, we're not even aware of it sometimes until we get into relationships, and then this stuff really gets kicked up. And so we're going into therapy, borrowing the therapist's nervous system to learn how to calm. They can handle what they throw at you. They hold their seat. They don't freak out, and they reflect back what's going on in their experience with your behavior. And over time, you learn to they're attuning to you, and they're meeting your needs in the therapeutic relationship. And you start to see what that feels like. What's that like? That healthy relationship. I can learn how to self-soothe now. I can be myself in front of this person, and I don't do this weird stuff my parents did. Oh, this is what a healthy relationship feels like. And you start to get a flavor of that. And you start to come back to that middle of secure base over time. And then you can practice it in your intimate relationships. You can do some couples therapy too. That'll help you to do that. And then, working and relating to yourself, getting into your own needs.
The attunement part that Miles is talking about, I only recently learned that is what is required where you borrow the nervous system from somebody else, but you can't. Okay, in most cases you cannot, and I'll speak more specifically about me. I could not read a book and follow the directions to get into the state
No.
that is that's required to do the work. And the stabilization, and the reason is because it seems like, you can correct me if I'm wrong because I'm interpreting this in real time as you're saying it.
Mm-hmm.
The exposing of the need that wasn't met dysregulates my nervous system. And because I was never attuned to, I never regulated my nervous system through that standard need. And instead of being able to meet that need or address it in a practical way, one, if you even know how to do that, two, because I didn't know how to do that, and I also couldn't regulate my own nervous system, what would come up is the desire to drink, have sex, jump into technology or avoid or whatever, anything to get away from that sensation. And maybe it is because of the trauma, but it's also because of the open loop, or the loop that never got closed with that particular need. And depending on who you are, who I am, those needs could be many, and they could have started very early on.
Likely.
So I'm trying to think of an example. Of the okay. So like lots of things come up for me when I'm thinking about like what specifically we're talking about when you're trying to undo trauma. So let's talk about like the trauma of enmeshment and boundaries. And if you have a hard time understanding who you are and what you want to say no to and yes to, then if I am, because I want to be specific with me. So because of my enmeshment experience, I felt like setting a boundary and enforcing a boundary was causing pain to the people that I loved.
That made you feel bad about that.
Made me feel pain on behalf of, allegedly on behalf of the other person. When in reality is enforcing a boundary is good because you're educating people on how to engage with you. And they can feel safe knowing that they are honoring who you are as a person. So you're creating safety when you're enforcing a boundary. But that's not the experience of somebody who's experienced enmeshment. Right. Where if I am meeting, I keep wanting to use second person, but I'll use first person language. If I am supposed to meet the needs of my parents, and I have a need separate from my parents, now I, as the 7-year-old, am in conflict with my parents who have much more power over me.
Bingo.
And they are able to transmit much more energy to me than I am to them. And if I try to enforce a boundary, they'll make it painful for me.
And you'll blame yourself, as kids do.
Well, and the parent is blaming.
And they'll literally blame you, or gaslight you, or make you feel guilty.
Yeah, and so that loop is very, very painful. And I have decades of experience with this, but just to share, like, I'll give you a snippet into the world of like what that looks like on a practical level. When I was like a young kid, if I would ask for something, I would get yelled at for making a request. And every kid annoys their parents with something. Hopefully lots of things if you have kids. So you're going to get annoyed with your kids. And but you can, if you want to traumatize your kids, you can punish them for making requests, and they will stop.
Yeah.
They will stop making requests. And unfortunately, that dynamic is very difficult to change. And it probably won't heal with that person in that dynamic ever again.
Very hard.
Very difficult. So the being able to come back to through a therapist, with therapist help, sit in a request or a need that I have and be able to make that to a person in a healthy way and attune to my own nervous system properly. That was a lot of work, and it continues to be work. So that is an example of enmeshment and this severance and this loop being created or uncreated, and the process of getting it healed. Like I said, I don't think you can do it on your own. I couldn't do it on my own. And if you're somebody who is just really empowered, maybe you can just read books and develop skills. And I can too, to some degree. But there are some areas of my own past and my own personhood that I had to heal directly with the help of someone else. And that was the only way I was going to be able to move forward and move through that.
Yeah, you got traumatized with another human. It'll make sense you get healed with another human. You can read about it in a book, and that gives you good intel. That's just the trailhead, the start. Then you got to do it in vivo. And in relationship is when it gets kicked up the most. Perfect time to practice. So go do it in a safe container with a therapist.
And to also iterate a very important point, not only is it not the job of your significant other to do this with you, it's your job. It's also not, it's probably not possible, because the other human is not responsible for your stuff. And most of the time they don't have the skill. And even worse than all of that, they actually want to make you feel good. So they will compensate for your lack of healing and your lack of showing up as a fully developed person. And that compensation creates a false pattern in the relationship and will eventually breed discord, disconnect, and resentment.
Or codependency.
Or codependency, which is really easy to do as well. And so you take the pressure off the relationship when you take ownership of that, and you put yourself in charge of doing the work, and also I give myself permission to not show up perfectly. And I redress conversations that I have with my girlfriend all the time where I'm like, hey, we talked about this. I didn't articulate what my needs actually are, not because I was hiding something, but actually I thought about it more, and I'm able to sit with my own requests that I would like to share with you now. And so I give myself permission to come back and revisit conversations that I did not have the way that I wanted to.
And you probably feel safe to do that with this relationship.
Yes.
It's a good sign when you feel like you can do that.
Yes. And I have a partner who's doing the work as well. So she's
boom,
dope.
That goes a long ways.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So this blow by blow process of attunement might be my new catchphrase. And I think that's what separates a teacher and a coach from a therapist, because as a coach and as a teacher, I need to enter the world of the student, but I can't take on their beliefs. So I have to enter the world of somebody who has a dysfunctional relationship with themselves or food or exercise or discomfort and beliefs that don't make sense. And I have to take on the reality of their life or enter or be with them in the reality of their life, but I can't actually attune to them because true attunement is outside of the scope of my work, and their role is to attune to what my nervous system is saying, not the other way around. And so sometimes a person has to do their own therapy outside of the coaching relationship.
Yep.
So that they can realign
Yes.
to the nervous system of the coach. And I've been there too, where I've been not able to enter into the conversation the coach is having. It's like, oh, this is what you need to be able to do. God, I can't do that. And I didn't know why.
Right.
But because I hadn't done the work yet.
Mm-hmm. That's the difference. Yeah. Coaching is more of a optimization of what you're doing. And if you can't get there, it's probably something in the way psychologically, emotionally that needs healing. And some coaches are quite good at it, and others are more just like top contour. It depends on who you're working with. But psychotherapist, a good one, well, that's what you're trying to do. And you can have both at the same time. Sometimes that's good. And if you have them talking to each other, even better, just like I have a good relationship with a good psychiatrist. You know, you get a team around someone and things really start to blossom.
And I think the distinctions are if you, because I've been all over the spectrum and competency around certain interpersonal skills in business and life and health. And sometimes I will get coaching and I'll be like, oh, that doesn't apply to me, when it absolutely fucking does. Cause it's so my subconscious. It's not, I don't have access to that part yet. And then I'll come back to it a few months later and I'm like, okay, this applies to me, but I don't know how to make it not apply to me anymore. And then even layer okay, I know what it is I'm supposed to do. I have intellectually what it is, but I can't get in there without the attunement part.
Yes.
Someone needs to hold my hand. Yeah. And not this part doesn't apply to everybody, because I'm in a business coaching group and some people just like don't know what the instructor is saying. They listen to it a few times, they watch the module, they do the worksheets, boom, they go crush it. Not everybody has all this underlying stuff. Sometimes it's just literally like turning the light on in a brand new room of your house. Oh, there's stuff in that room. Oh, cool. What's in here? And you can explore it without fear. Yeah. And you don't have trauma holding you back. It's like a crucial conversation or boundaries. Mm-hmm. Oh, no, I value myself. My needs matter. I
can make requests.
I know what requests to make. Mm-hmm. I can make the request, given as long as I frame it in terms of a request and not an ultimatum. Mm-hmm. I'm communicating this well. Okay, with a little bit of practice, I can do that. Yeah. And that's, I think, a lot of people are in that place where they just need to learn the skills and practice them, and that's great. So, but if you're stuck and you're just not able to do a good job or conquer something, or you can only conquer it with a great amount of, like for me, it was asking for money. Like I still just, no matter how many, I've been doing this for decades, and I always have anxiety around asking for money. And at the core of it, it's self-value.
And asking for needs. And what happened when you were a kid? You got kicked in the nuts.
That's right. That's right. You get shamed and bullied.
Yep.
Or I got shamed and bullied. And like no amount of reading a sales book is going to make you value yourself.
Nope.
So without doing the work, it's functionally impossible. And this is where I think in business, people in high octane roles and who are asking for a lot of money for big transactions, for people who work for large banks or investment firms, I think that's why drugs are so much a part of it, because like you're building a product that's going to get you a $10 million commission. And a lot of people, that brings up a lot of stuff, but to smash it down, a few lines of blow every
numb
day.
That shit out. Yeah.
You can numb it out for a long time. So I think that coping mechanisms, coping strategies come into play here. But we're hammering this home because if the goal is to create more positive, intimate relationships and you and or if you're like me, or maybe like Miles used to be, and would bristle when people would get to know you and sabotage a relationship or avoid or try to tit for tat somebody and to not let people help you or do things for you, you can dance around that. Well, I have friends who never let anyone help them, and they're living life on their own terms, and they live somewhat isolated, somewhat remote lives.
Yeah, you can do that and feel safe, but at what price? Price of relationship, price of depth of life.
And if you're an attractive woman or a wealthy man, you can keep having the same relationship over and over again.
Push the reset button.
And that's success for you in your mind. You've created this vision like, oh, this is just what relationships are.
Right.
Yeah. And so this, if true, like getting to know other people and like having this like these really rich experiences with people is part of what you want, then to generate them, you will have to do something new and different.
Yes.
How long we've been going on this?
It's an hour and a half now. This is probably our longest one.
Okay.
Hopefully we've not left people behind, but it's an important one. We can probably start to wrap up, but you have final thoughts?
I think that I think what a lot of times when people want to have better romantic relationships, they like write a better profile for their Tinder page, and they get better at having first dates, or they try to work out more, which is all those things are good. Like, on a fundamental level, your health and fitness, looking good, being proud of your life, like, investing in your career and your vocation and your passion, all those things are actually pretty rewarding. And it still doesn't mean that you're ready for these important relationships and friendships. And you still may never be in a place where you're going to tolerate true intimacy. And as somebody who is in the middle of this work himself, I can say that it doesn't feel good to do the work all the time, but a little bit goes a long way. I would consider myself very new to this, and I'm already reaping such great rewards from the process of healing my relationship with myself. And that's what the process of creating a secure attachment is.
Correct. Yeah. Well said. Way to land the plane.
Boom. Awesome, man. I learned a lot.
Good.
In this.
I got so much more to talk about with attachment, and I'm sure we'll have future episodes where we come back. There's just so much to it and so much I've left off.
What do we leave out today? Let's give a teaser for the next one.
For attachment? Well, we can go deep into John Bowlby, Mary Ainsworth, all their work. They're the Bowlby's probably the father of attachment theory. Winnicott, all these guys and gals coming after Freud and Jung, they started touching upon this stuff. There's just so much that we could get into. And it depends on how much a listener wants to know about theory versus practice, or both. But we can definitely highlight a few things.
Well, okay. I think that what we can safely say is it's all your parents' fault.
But it's your job to heal it. It's not your fault, but it's your responsibility to heal it. Your parents cannot do it anymore. You can't go back in time. You can have current conversations that may help, but you got to self-parent, and you got to get help with a skilled psychotherapist and or coach, and then practice it in your relationships. Amen to that.
All right. So if you haven't been motivated enough to find a freaking therapist to help you, or get into this work yourself, I don't know what will. It'll enhance your whole life. All you have to do is just cry in front of a stranger for a few more years.
It's real easy, and pay him a bunch of money to do it.
That's right.
A little masochistic, but it works out in the end. All right. We will leave it there and pick up next week. Until then, we are out.
Peace.